Welcome everybody to our second installment on the American Rescue Plan. And today I'm joined here with Paul Coleman, CFP, one of the advisors here at Level Financial, and he'll join us here on the screen in a second. But today we're going to focus primarily, actually exclusively on stimulus checks, which seems to be the big question that lots of people have. So we'll go into a couple of facets on that in the next few minutes. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Paul. And Paul, let's talk about recovery rebates and stimulus checks.
All right. Hey, Mike, thanks for having me back on to talk more about the specifics of one of the most interesting facets of that American Rescue Plan that was just passed. So everybody's referring to them as stimulus checks. They are known in the bill as recovery rebates. As discussed in our last video, those are $1,400 or $1,400 per adult and per dependent based on some income levels. And we'll get into what those income levels are. I want to point out again that this bill is using the term dependent, whereas the previous two, which were the CARES Act and the Consolidated Appropriations Act, passed in March and October of 2020, respectively, those two used the definition to pay out of a parent and a child, or a taxpayer and a child. So moving to a dependent opens this rebate up to a lot more people. So there's no maximum number of dependents that can be paid out for this payment, and a little bit on the definition of a dependent. You should seek out the IRS for a very clear, or go to the IRS website for a very clear, very full definition. But in general, the basics are a dependent needs to be a US citizen, US national, or a US resident. They have to be related to you. They cannot be claiming themselves if they're filing their own tax return. So it's feasible that you would have a 18, 19, 20-year-old child in college who's filing their own tax return. And if they do that, they cannot claim themselves as a dependent. You need to be claiming them as a dependent. If it's a child of yours, they need to either be under the age of 19 or under the age of 24 if they're a full-time student. That would be as of the end of the 2021 tax year, because these recovery rebates are a prepaid credit for the 21 tax year. If your child is disabled, fully disabled, there's no age limit. They need to live with you for more than half of the year, and they need to be financially supported by you. So if they're earning their own income, it cannot provide more than half of their support. For relatives, so not necessarily children, but relatives, this is a parent that may be living with you, a brother, many different ones there that would count. They need to live with you. They need to be financially supported by you, and they cannot be claimed by anybody else. Back to the children, they also cannot be claimed as a dependent by anybody else. So if we're talking divorced spouses, one of you gets to claim that child, the other does not, and you would want to agree ahead of time on that.
So Paul, I understand then that there, in this round of stimulus, there are some differences in eligibility over the previous stimulus checks. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, great question. So there's income limits on who gets paid a stimulus check and how much. It's not actually income, it's AGI, which is the term off your tax form that stands for adjusted gross income. For the most part, that is your gross income, but there's a few adjustments there. We won't dive into that today, but your tax preparer or the tax program you're using can get that number figured out very easily. So for people filing as single on their tax return, if they make $75,000 AGI or more, they will start losing their recovery rebate. And the moment they hit $80,000, it's completely gone. So for a single individual with just one recovery rebate and no dependents, they're actually losing about $280 of that check for every $1,000 they make over $75,000. For those filing head of household is often a single parent with one dependent or more dependents. They get to file somewhere between single and married. It's known as a phase out. Their phase out starts at $112,500 AGI and ends at $120,000. So the moment that head of household filer hits $120,000 AGI for the 2021 tax year, they will not get any recovery rebates, regardless of how many dependents were on their tax return. For those filing jointly, married filing jointly, the phase out starts at 150,000 and ends at 160,000. Now, these phase outs are different versus the last two rebates paid, again, in March and October of 2020. Those were a little more gentle in their phase out range. And what those did is you gave up $5 of the rebate per $100 that you were past the phase out range start for your income. So if somebody earned $1,000 more than the phase out range, they lost $50 of their rebate check. And if you took a head of household person who had multiple children on their return, they were eligible for a large dollar amount up front, and it took a significant amount of income past the phase out range to erase that rebate check. This year, it's much, much tighter. And regardless of the number of dependents, you're losing a lot of your whole rebate check across a very narrow range of income.
Mm-hmm. So this is another difference from what my understanding here too, is that this is a prepayment of a 2021 credit, not a little bit different than the last time around, correct?
Similar but different. And I'm going to try and go slow here because, boy, this gets very, I don't want to say complex. We have to be very careful with the details here. When talking about the previous two stimulus checks that were paid out in 2020, they were based on whatever tax return the IRS had on file at the time they were making the determination of what to pay you. Those were a prepayment of a 2020 credit, often based on either the 18 or 19 tax return on file. For this third stimulus check, the one we're really focusing on today, those are prepayments of a 2021 tax credit, often based or will be based on either your 2019 or 2020 tax return, and potentially your 21 tax return, which won't even be filed for another year. So it's all about whatever tax return the IRS has on file the day they're making the determination on what to pay you. And this can lead to a lot of planning opportunities that I want to make sure we get into. But for this third stimulus payment, there's three key checkpoints to keep in mind. So right now, March of 21, people are filing their 2020 return, but not many have. So for the most part, the IRS will be basing these immediate stimulus check payments on what your 2019 AGI was. So if your 2019 or 2020 tax return is filed now, the stimulus amount is based on the AGI of that return. There is a second date. I want to get the title right here. I think it's, I lost it. It is the additional payment determination date. So that's checkpoint number 2. If your 2019 return precludes you from getting a rebate check and your 2020 return is not yet filed, but it is filed by the earlier of 90 days after the 2020 calendar year filing deadline or September 1st, 2021, and your 2020 return qualifies you for stimulus that your 2019 return did not, then the IRS will send you the rebate that your tax return qualifies you for. That is a mouthful, and I know Mike's going to put up some graphics to help us with that.
Yeah, we will definitely, I think we'll definitely put a graphic on the screen for that here. So a question on that, Paul, would be when would that rebate be sent to filers that you just spoke of?
Yeah, so one note on those dates I listed off, we talked about the earlier of 90 days after the tax filing deadline or September 1. Congress left that 90-day window open because it's possible they will change the 2020 tax filing deadline. That has not happened yet, but it's possible, and they wanted to make this deadline flexible to take that into account. If you qualify when you're filing under the, I've lost it again, the additional payment determination date, they will automatically, the IRS will automatically send out that additional refund or that additional rebate that you're eligible for. And later on, we'll get into how they're actually paying those.
Okay.
There is a third and final checkpoint to determine if a taxpayer is eligible for any recovery rebate. That is when you actually file your 2021 tax return in the 2022 year. So again, we're in March of 21 right now. We're all working on filing our 2020 tax return. 1 year from now, we'll be working on filing our 21 tax return. And at that point, if that 21 return says that the AGI you earned for the 2021 tax year qualifies you for a rebate, they will pay you out whatever you qualify for.
Okay, so that's interesting. So this kind of lends itself to what you were talking about before with planning opportunities. It sounds to me like there are some pretty unique financial planning opportunities based on timing that I'm sure you want to go into here.
Yeah, so this is key. There is the ability for you to get a little bit of recovery rebate or possibly a full recovery rebate. And since it's ultimately based on your 21 tax AGI, there's ability to get a rebate that you may otherwise not qualify for if you just waited to file your 21 tax return. So my suggestion would be, and you should review this with your financial professional, your financial advisor, and your tax preparer, but for certain people, you could consider holding off on filing your 2020 return if your 2019 return qualifies you for a larger rebate than what your 2020 return otherwise would. And I would also say you should consider filing your 2020 return by that additional payment determination date if it qualifies you for a larger rebate than what you would receive right now, which is March of 21, or after you file your 21 return. So paying attention to when that additional payment determination date hits and if it could benefit you is important. Somebody may watch this and say, well, all the tax returns are due by April 15th or whenever they extend it. But it's important to remember that you always have the option to file a form with the IRS that extends your tax filing deadline by 6 months. You don't have to wait for the IRS to give you permission. It's already there. If you're someone that commonly extends your tax filing deadline to October 15th, it may behoove you to file by that additional payment determination date in this instance. And finally, if your 2019 and your 2020 income are precluding you from receiving any rebate checks right now, but it's important to keep in mind that you have some control over your 2021 income. We're in that tax year. There are things that could potentially be done to lower your income. Now, I'm not saying quit work in October to make less money, but things like increasing or maximizing the contributions to your pre-tax employer-sponsored retirement plan. That's a 401k, 403b, 457 deferred comp. Those types of things can lower your AGI. That's for those who are working. And finally, if you're in retirement and you're at least age 70.5, you can give money directly from your IRA to a public charity and have that dollar amount never even show up on your tax return. Where this would matter is actually for those that are 72 and older, because they're going to be forced to take required minimum distributions. And if they plan on donating to charity, or if they would like to, and their income is just a little bit too high, you could, instead of distributing your RMD, you could use a qualified charitable distribution to give it directly to the charity and have that money avoid hitting your tax return. And now you may have qualified yourself for some recovery rebate. Again, these things really need to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, and you should absolutely be reviewing this with the various professionals in your life.
Right, and I see here too that there are no clawbacks on overpayment of stimulus. So to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, hugely important to understand that one. So this whole time, the last 10 minutes, we've been talking about which tax return qualifies you for how much, but how it's ultimately based on your 2021 AGI. Well, when it comes time to file your 2021 tax return, if it turns out that you were not eligible for recovery rebate, but you had been paid out a rebate, they will not claw it back. That is written into the bill. That is the same as how they treated the first two rebates paid in 2020. So that's a huge thing to keep in mind when you're working through these planning opportunities.
All right, Paul. So now that we've talked about all the details of the stimulus checks, let's talk probably what people are most interested in, which is the how and when people will receive these checks. What do you know about that?
Yeah, great question. So the mechanics of when you'll actually get your rebate checks, they're going to be handled the same way that the previous two rebate checks were. So if you received any of those, expect that to come in the same way. What the IRS is doing is taking a look at your most recent tax return on file, determining how they sent you a refund from that tax return, and processing these rebates the same exact way. So that's going to be direct deposit for the majority of us to whatever account the IRS has on file. Those have already started as of last Friday, I've heard. Don't worry if you haven't received yours yet. It is expected to take a couple of weeks, with the majority being done actually tomorrow, the 17th. After they get those direct deposits done, it's expected they'll move into mailing paper checks to the address they have on file, and also mailing prepaid debit cards. I should add that not everyone files a tax return, and this stimulus check is based on a tax return. But for many people receiving federal benefits such as Social Security, retirement, survivor or disability benefits, railroad retirement benefits, SSI, Veterans Affairs benefits, et cetera, you should still be receiving that payment the same way you receive those payments. So if after listening to this video, you think you're eligible, but you don't receive something, I would get on the IRS website and check that out, or talk to an advisor or an accountant to make sure you have that, get what you deserve.
Okay, great. And so let's make sure too, we'll put it up on the screen. There's a tracker, a website that people can go to figure out where their payment is, and we'll just put it up on the screen here. It's an IRS website, and they can go there if they want to check on the status of their rebate checks. So good. Well, I think that was a great quick recap. So on behalf of Paul Coleman, I'm Mike Hebern here with Level Financial Advisors. And thank you for joining us for, again, one of our short videos on the American Rescue Plan. And we do plan on having further videos here in the next few days. So please stay tuned and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you get a chance. So until then, thanks and have a great night.
Thank you.